Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, October 10th, 2024, and we are continuing our best farm advice ever week. Today we are talking about confining your days, adding value without adding work, and asking dumb questions, which will all make sense soon. So let's do it. Okay, so Hurricane Milton is wreaking havoc on Florida right now. Hopefully our farmer friends and their customers and everyone else there in that area is safe and sound and your farms all survive this thing. Also, apparently there is a large solar storm headed our way today. So be on the lookout for both beautiful northern lights this evening as well as potential widespread damage to the power grid. So that's kind of a mixed bag there. Now, there is a fun video of the comet Chuchishan Atlas photobombing the flare taken by the SOHO satellite because space has, for all its intimidating enormity, a fun, silly side. Anyway, today I want to talk about one piece of advice that I think I first heard from J.M. Fortier back in 2014 at an event here nearby in Lexington, Kentucky, and it was simply to confine your workday. The basic idea here is that if you do not have a set stopping point for your workday, you will not stop until you have to. But if you do have a defined stopping point, like say 4 p.m. or whatever, you will be forced to stop, so you have to find more efficient ways to work. You have to or you won't get them done. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So by confining your day to a set number of hours, you effectively manufacture that necessity. This idea is true for all business owners and all contractors. On our farm, that stop hour is 4 p.m. I rarely work past 4 p.m., save for having to water the greenhouse sometimes in the summer because I'm a dummy and refuse to set up some sort of automated watering system. But 4 p.m. is the cutoff of actual labor, and more often than not, we get everything done by then or even earlier. It definitely did not used to be that way. I used to farm until dark. I used to farm until I could barely stand. What you notice when you confine your day to a certain set of hours is that you not only make things more efficient, but you also start looking at certain crops you are producing or tasks you are doing and asking yourself, and by yourself, I mostly mean your numbers, if that crop or task, either one, makes sense anymore financially, or two, can be done more efficiently. Some crops are just wildly labor intensive. Tunnel tomatoes, for instance. With all the pruning and harvesting and trellising, you have to be selling every single tomato at a pretty high price to make a good profit from them. And even then, lettuce is going to make you a better profit. Arugula is going to make you a better profit. Lots of things are more profitable than tunnel tomatoes. Or maybe it's not a crop. Maybe once you start to do this, you realize how much time you are spending looking for tools or fiddling with the irrigation. So you organize your tools and start to fix the irrigation in a more permanent way so you can complete your day on time. Because confining your day is not just about stopping at a certain time. It's a tool for evaluating your systems, but also it is about stopping at a certain time, especially when you have a family and kids and a community to tend to. Even with this show, I am confining the amount of time I spend on it so that I can leave half of the day at least for farming. If I didn't confine or constrain it, and if I did not give it a set number of hours, I would probably just spend all day every day working on it, trying to perfect the videos and notes and audio and etc. If it's imperfect, just know that's because I'm hanging out with my kids or my wife or coaching soccer or farming. Again, your relationships, not your work, are going to be what you care about at the end of your life. Make sure those get the proper attention now that they need so that they can remain strong throughout your lifetime. Without question, that little tidbit I took from J.M. Fortier all those years ago has served me well. But one more thing I want to squeeze in on this particular point is that thing I'm always saying about if you want something done, give it to a busy person. It's something my dad told me a long time ago and something I observed a lot in kitchen work, which I'll talk about actually in the third segment today. When I was cooking, I noticed that on the busiest days, when a chef would randomly hand me an extra task to add to my list, my brain would start to compartmentalize the list and do a sort of on-the-fly triage where I would rapidly find what I could bump and what absolutely had to get done first. It didn't always require me to work faster, though sometimes that was the case, but rather because I was already busy, I knew where I could find the time. I basically had to cut the fat in a kitchen. That could be literal or figuratively, I guess, because I didn't have a choice. In a restaurant, the time constraints are built in. There are ticket times and service times. They don't have much give. So an example would be like, after I put the potatoes Anna in the oven, I knew I had 45 minutes. I could bust out a couple other tasks while that cooked. Or when I went to cut the stock mirepoix, 50% onions, 25% carrots, and 25% celery, I would also bring enough produce in containers to cut the sauce mirepoix and the brunoise garnish mirepoix, which is just kitchen speak for really tiny and well-cut onions, carrots, and celery. Busy people find little ways to save time. Find enough of those moments, and it adds up to a lot of saved time over the course of a day. Of course, my dad was merely making an observation when he said that. If you want something done, give it to a busy person. But I do think there is some value in forcing yourself to be and stay busy. When I pick up my phone and start scrolling, I think, oh, I could be doing this, or I could be getting done with my day a little bit earlier so I can do whatever I want this evening. Like I said, I don't think it was meant to be a philosophy, but, well, sometimes philosophies happen. So I don't know if it's advice that I'm giving here, but embracing busyness by confining your days can actually free you up to do other things that you love to do. All right, next we are going to get a question from a Patreon member on adding income streams without adding too much work. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, want to support our work, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. They live at the top of my questions list. You can join for as low as $2 a month, and I'll give you a shout out at the end of the show the following day because you're rad and you support ecological farmer things. It's like double rad. Anyway, today's question comes from Stein, who writes, I think an interesting topic could be unconventional ways to add little income streams to your bottom line. Perhaps putting a small honesty box is suitable for some. Others may figure out that they can sell turnip greens in addition to the turnips themselves, etc. Perhaps get some ideas from the community about unexpected income streams that creative minds came up with. So first, yes, community. I'd love to hear your ideas on this question. Personally, I'm going to take this question and build on it a bit. I am a huge fan of adding value, but simultaneously not as much of a huge fan of value-added products, because more often than not, by adding a product, you are basically adding a whole other business, like salsa or tomato paste or whatever the product may be. It needs labels, it needs marketing, it needs storage and containers, it needs a commercial kitchen if it's food, or at least has to follow the regulations around cottage bakeries. Now, 100% value-added products can and do work for some people. It's just that I think before venturing down a road like that, it may be worth exploring how you can add value to your business without adding a whole other job or, well, a whole other business. Services can be one way to do that. So maybe something like a choose your own or a home delivery CSA for a slightly higher price. I like delivery as an option, even if it's slightly more labor-intensive example of adding value. But I like it, especially if you are already doing deliveries to restaurants, like you're already out delivering, may as well add some personal deliveries. For adding delivery, maybe it's a CSA, but it could also be an online store and you set up a delivery boundary and charge $5 or $7 or $10 or whatever makes sense for your clientele, then allow them to buy whatever they want and you'll deliver it instead of having them have to pick it up at the farm or at a market or whatever. Even if you have to hire someone to do this delivery job, but you can make 10 or 20 deliveries in an hour, that could be a good value add without creating an entirely new business. Yes, there would be some more labor there in organizing and delivering, but less so than processing and labeling and storing a product. Another service that adds value to a product is how it is presented. This is especially true for high-end restaurants. Chefs in particular love to create beautiful things and will often pay slightly more for a product that, at the very least, looks higher end, looks beautiful. Now, this isn't universal. Some chefs don't have a choice and will look We'll look at $7 or $10 a pound lettuce mix longingly, no matter how it's packaged, as they turn around and buy the $5 a pound or $4 a pound stuff that rots in a day from the box truck. But if you grow really great produce and present it well to a chef, that can be an easy value add for you. The same thing applies to farmers markets. Just having pristine looking produce means you can charge more than those whose produce is slightly wilted or slightly dirty or whatever. Giving customers an experience and relationship to their food is also an easy value add. People are more likely to support you if they know you and like you and have a connection to you and the farm. This could be as simple as taking your time to chat with people at the farmer's market, kind of get to know them, let them get to know you, or allowing your customers to come take a free farm tour once a year for an event. Social media, as obnoxious as it is, can also contribute to that. People can share what they're making with your food, and they can see what's coming up out of the field. Though I do hesitate to suggest trying to make money on social media. It's a lot of work to make money on TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, and will suck you into a constant need to produce something new every single day, he says as he produces a daily podcast. But you get the idea. It's a lot of work for not a lot of pay. So if it evolves into that, great, but start out just thinking, how can I use this to connect to my customers? Just having a farm store can add a lot of value because it is so little work. Yes, there may be the upfront cost of building a small structure or moving one onto the property or modifying an existing one, but with the right design, you can leave an honor box there or an honesty box, whatever you want to call it, for people to pay, which could make a good show topic for the future because there are ways to do that safely. If you did a farm store, perhaps you can find ways to add even more value to that space with electric vehicle charging stations, and or self-guided farm trails through the farm with a sign to contribute to your Venmo. I like your question, Stein, and hopefully others can add their ideas to what I just described. All right, next we're going to take a quick break and then talk about the value of asking questions. Hey you all, the No-Till Growers crew and I want to use the ad space today to point you towards a couple resources to help farmers in North Carolina directly affected by Hurricane Helene. Both the Organic Grower School, or OGS, and the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, called CFSA, are local ag organizations there who have done a lot of work gathering resources for those of us who want to chip in. So their resources will be linked in the show notes, as well as the Appalachian Sustainable Agriculture Project, or ASAP, which was the organization mentioned by Lyric last Tuesday when I spoke with her about her farm's experience with the hurricane. It is impossible to overstate how big of a disaster this is. Sincerely, Helene is one of the worst American disasters since Katrina, so please help if you can, even if just throwing a few bucks towards a farmer's GoFundMe would be huge. Thanks, and back to the show. I just spilled water all over myself. So my first jobs were in kitchens. I worked in fast food for around 4 years, and then I graduated to working as a line cook in a fast casual place for a couple years. Then I read Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain, which in retrospect should not have inspired someone to want to be a chef in a high-end kitchen, but something about the low pay, the long hours, the drugs and alcohol, I was like, I have found my people. So I started sending my resume to restaurants in Louisville to try and get a job as a cook in a high-end establishment of some sort. And to my amazement, I got calls. Little did I know at the time, people were not exactly clamoring to work in this industry. Most people were there by accident because it was the only job they could get, or increasingly at that time, were trying to get on the Food Network, or were there for the lifestyle because it's an industry where you kind of expect your workers to be a little hungover. So for some workers, that's a bonus. So for a chef to get a resume that was like, I want to learn how to be a chef, they were probably like, score. So anyway, I took a job at a nice French bistro in Louisville and moved my life up there from my small town in central Kentucky where I grew up. And I got completely torn to pieces at that place. I was incredibly naive and didn't really know how to cook. My chef would absolutely just tear into me every time I got something wrong. I learned pretty fast in that experience, because he would scream it at me, that it was always better to ask stupid questions instead of doing a stupid thing. In other words, if he asked me to chop onions instead of going ahead and chopping the entire bag of onions, I would chop half of an onion, take it to him to double check the size and the quality of the cut, and then keep that as my example for cutting the rest of the onions. Yes, this slowed me down quite a bit, but it made me a better cook and increased the quality of my work and the satisfaction from my chef, which for my own sanity was generally a good idea. Anytime I was asked to do something, I started to look at each step of the process and determine where it wasn't clear what he wanted me to do. And I would ask him. making sure to ask questions, even though the questions sometimes annoyed him, dramatically reduced the number of things thrown at me or screamed at me. But it also gave me a new system to look at tasks. And so I became reasonably good at that, at asking questions. I started to like what I could call finding the question. That is, when something is presented in a very straightforward way, what is the question not being asked? I mean, where could this particular task be screwed up? I gravitated, in fact, towards journalism in my 20s and 30s because it's asking questions professionally, and I love that. I love science because it's all about asking questions and trying to answer them to often only come up with more questions, which is also fun. Now, questions are a big part of what I do in farming. If something is done a certain way, why? Take the video I did on onions, for example. I had seen for years how people trim their onions before planting to improve yield. I'd probably even said it myself. It's so common. It's practically a mantra in the gardening world. And I was like, does it though? Does it help? Where does that idea come from? And has it been studied? It turned out after reading the research that no, it does not improve yields. And also it comes from large-scale onion farmers looking for faster ways to transplant onions without losing too much yield, because onions are wont to tangle together if they're left really long. That's it. It has nothing to do with improving the yield or bulb size, and more often than not, it actually decreases those things. According to the studies, it's just really all about efficiency. So I have stopped trimming my own onions because it's just an unnecessary step. So I got good at asking questions for my own survival. At least that's what it felt like to work in kitchens in the early aughts, like survival. But I think it's a skill we can all develop, and I think it's a skill that can help us be better growers. It's something I impress upon people who have worked for us. And if you ever have a moment of doubt, just ask. There are no stupid questions. No stupid questions even for the owner to ask. I ask myself stuff all the time. Why am I planting X crop like this? Is there a better way to do it? Or does tighter spacing actually give you more yield on this particular crop? For some of that, there are no known or at least no directly applicable answers, and you will have to take and review your own data, say planting 2 beds at 2 different spacings to see what the results yield. But for other things like the onions, the data is already there. When it comes to growing methods, a good question is simply, is this actually the best way to grow or store or package this crop? Is there a better way? Those questions can get you pretty far and can improve your systems dramatically. Anyways, I started thinking about this idea of the importance of asking questions and how it's been so important to my life while I was working on yesterday's show. It was in the 3rd segment when I was talking about working harder than you dream. So that idea of working harder than you dream, which is to say that hope and dreams can be fuel, but you have to do the work to accomplish them. Anyway, that made me think of this quote I'd heard recently from the University of Kentucky men's basketball coach in a video they did about their training from one of their practices, which, yes, I will go shamelessly anywhere for inspiration. But he told his team, the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding. It's a quote I like and that I'd heard before that the internet attributes to Dipen Palmer. But the thing is, I cannot find a single solitary reference to who in the world Dipen Palmer is. There is not a Wikipedia page. There is not a book this Palmer person wrote where the quote could have been extracted. I asked Google, but there was not much there except for inspirational images and blogs and various social media attributions attributing this quote to Dipen Palmer. There is one person with that name on LinkedIn who is the manager of one company and maybe like the director of another in India who seemed like an unlikely candidate for this particular quote. There is a photographer with like 500 Instagram followers, another perhaps unlikely candidate. And there is an Indian actress named Disha Palmer, but not Dipen. Certainly there are others named Dipen Palmer in the world, but no prominent figure who I could find said this quote. And just so it's clear, this quote is freaking everywhere. It's even on posters with this particular attribution, Dipen Palmer. To someone in some gym or office somewhere, Dipen Palmer is their reason for success, is their reason for pushing through. I asked Google's AI search engine, Gemini, with the prompt, who said the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding? And Gemini told me the quote, the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding, is attributed to Dipen Palmer. And so I said, okay, cool. Who is Dipen Palmer? And Gemini responded, I do not have enough information about that person to help with your request. I am a large language model and I am able to communicate and generate human-like text in response to a wide range of prompts and questions, but my knowledge about this person is limited. Is there anything else I can do to help you with this request? So suddenly, the magic I started looking for was how in the world was this quote attributed to like a completely, not just unknown, but seemingly unknowable human by so many people without anyone asking the question, wait, who is Dipen Palmer? Honestly, it's because the work those people were avoiding was probably just a simple fact check. Now, to be fair, it's a totally good quote without knowing who Dipen Palmer is, but it is fascinating that there is this whole person who has created this quote that nobody has any idea who it is. So I guess that's your farming lesson for the day. Be curious, ask questions. If someone please find Dipen Palmer, their quote is looking for them. Now, maybe I'm entirely wrong and Dipen Palmer is huge non-English speaking countries with non-English speaking AI or whatever, in which case feel free to correct me. And I'll send my apologies tomorrow on the show. But also tomorrow on the show, we will get to some of your great farming advice from the week that you all sent over with my unsolicited commentary. Like and share this video /podcast if you found it helpful. Make sure you are subscribed or following wherever you are hearing this. Shout out to Willie Breeding for the theme music and the team at No-Till Growers for their support. If you are indeed enjoying this show and want to see it keep going and growing, please consider signing up to be a patron at patreon.com/no-till-growers, where I am shouting out every new member for the month of October. Or if you just bump up from one level to another, you also get a shout out on the show. Otherwise, I will see you all back here tomorrow and we'll close out with those Patreon shout outs. So huge shout outs today to Brandon Ross. Ross is like my pretend, it's the last name that people think I say when I say Frost. I don't know. I wonder, Brandon, does anybody ever think you're Brandon Frost? Also, a funny thing about my name is when I used to call people for like takeout in New York, they always, I would say, you know, they'd ask me for a name and I would say Jesse and I would spell it because people started to get it wrong. And even when I spelled it right, even when I spelled it over the phone, they would still get it wrong and they would think it was Jeffy, Jeffe. And it gave me like a complex. I was like, can I not pronounce my S's? Like there are probably people in the world that think my name is Farmer Jeffy, which is funny, especially because the spelling is kind of like Hefe. Anyway, shout outs to Brandon Ross and Tavernus. Thank you for watching or listening. We'll see you tomorrow.